The high plains offered a stark, windswept vista. Winter had arrived early with a biting wind. The sun bled into the horizon over snowy sands. A lone fortress stood against the fading light. Last year, the Dominion took Onyx Canyon from the Union. They had shamed its commander and threatened the city. Now, a year later, the roles were reversed. Union soldiers had camped outside the city for a month. They rested and gathered their strength for one last fight. This period of waiting was difficult for some. A particular young officer grew restless. He told the general they had been readying for a month. This was Wyatt's third plea for battle in 10 days. He argued their recent victories were a great advantage. He believed it was the perfect time to retake Onyx Canyon. Wyatt worried that waiting would dull their fighting edge. Their stockpiled supplies were also running low. General Caleb stood over a sand table map. He studied the terrain of the Northern Territories. He remained silent. Another officer, Sam, disagreed with Wyatt. He cited the art of war. He reminded them that attacking a fortified city was a last resort. Onyx Canyon was a key strategic fortress. Its defenses were formidable and difficult to breach. It was unlike the small towns they had recently captured. Sam was a veteran of the northern campaigns. He was known for his fierce loyalty to his men. He grieved for every soldier lost under his command. For Sam, minimizing casualties was the highest priority. He preferred a less glorious victory to a costly one. Caleb respected this noble trait in his senior officer. Wyatt countered Sam's point. He admitted the siege would be difficult, but he questioned if waiting would make it any easier. Since battle was inevitable, he argued for a swift resolution. Caleb pressed his temples gently. He told Wyatt that passion was good, but his was hot enough to scald coffee. After a year in the north, Caleb had dropped his formal demeanor. His men had grown used to his more relaxed persona. Old soldiers recalled a time when the general was gravely ill. They said he had changed after cheating death. Back then, the general's behavior was erratic. This current version was better. At least he did not sleep all day. Most importantly, he never led them to defeat. Wyatt respected Caleb's judgment. He asked the general to instruct him. Caleb reminded him of General Miller's defeat last winter. Wyatt quickly recalled the events. General Miller was trapped in Onyx Canyon. A blizzard blocked his supply lines. With no food or ammunition left, he opened the gates. He led a desperate final charge. His forces were overwhelmed by the Dominion's elite troops. He died in the battle. Caleb asked if he understood now. Wyatt's mind, sharp in matters of strategy, saw the connection. His eyes lit up with understanding. The general planned to repeat history. He would exhaust the enemy's supplies. He would force them to fight on his terms. Caleb nodded in confirmation. With its supply routes cut, Onyx Canyon was an isolated city. The Union Army had a steady flow of provisions. The Dominion forces inside could only deplete their stores. By forcing a war of attrition, they could cut their own casualties in half. Sam voiced his complete agreement. He called it a brilliant reversal of last year's strategy. The Dominion's captured supplies would last them 50 days at most. A month had already passed. In 2 more weeks, the enemy would face a choice. They could starve or they could charge out to fight. Their morale would be broken. By then, the Union Army would be rested and ready. Wyatt, now convinced, still had a concern. He pointed out that both sides needed supplies. The success of the plan depended on their own endurance. Caleb turned to his quiet aide, Silas. He asked how many days of rations they had left. Silas reported less than 10 days' worth remained. However, he mentioned a letter from Adrian, the royal physician. A large shipment from the southern states was coming. It was traveling by river, then overland, should arrive soon. Sam was ecstatic. He declared that would be more than enough time. This assumed the supplies arrived safely. Caleb considered the risk. He asked Silas to personally oversee the convoy's final leg. Silas agreed and prepared to depart immediately. With the plan settled, Caleb and Wyatt discussed siege equipment. Sam watched them, a thought forming. He commented that the general had changed considerably. Caleb asked him to explain. Sam recalled that 2 years ago, Caleb disliked strategy meetings. He would defer all major decisions to others. Now he meticulously oversaw every detail. Caleb gave a low laugh. He confessed he was desperate to win. He murmured that he could not afford to die. In the capital, the final battle weighed heavily on Adrian. He had not slept for 3 days. He was securing the very supply shipment Caleb needed. That shipment could sustain the Northern Army for a month. With everything finally arranged, a sliver of peace settled in him. As he left the Department of War, he noticed the snow. It was a light flurry, yet it made his tired eyes ache. He felt a moment of dizziness and stepped back. He bumped into the Assistant Secretary of Defense. The secretary was a young, capable man. He was also a distant relative of the Queen Mother. He was a natural ally to Adrian's faction. He had worked with Adrian on the supply logistics. Seeing Adrian's pale face, he offered reassurance. He spoke of Caleb's recent successes. The general had surrounded Onyx Canyon. Its recapture was only a matter of time. The secretary told Adrian not to worry. The Union would be victorious. Adrian nodded. He hoped that was true. The secretary offered to escort him, noting the slick roads. Adrian declined politely. Though disappointed, the secretary did not insist. He simply wished Adrian a safe journey. Adrian had not walked far when a messenger from the palace arrived. The Queen Mother invited him for dinner. This had become a frequent occurrence over the past year. Palace gossip suggested the Queen treated him like a son. Some said she favored him even over the king. But Adrian knew the real reason for her kindness. Her younger son, Prince Liam, was mentally impaired, and he only ever smiled for Adrian. The Queen's invitations were often just to see her son happy. When Adrian arrived, he saw the king's carriage outside. He asked the head servant if the king was present. The servant confirmed it. King Julian was with Prince Liam in the back garden. They were playing in the snow. In the garden, the two royal brothers were building a snowman. Or rather, King Julian was building it alone. Liam could not manage such a complex task. He simply rolled small snowballs and lined them up. Julian spoke to him constantly, but Liam showed no reaction. An old nanny saw Adrian and smiled brightly. She called out to the prince, pointing toward the visitor. Liam looked up. His blank expression broke into a spontaneous, radiant smile. Julian, seeing his brother smile for the first time, was amazed. He murmured how beautiful his little brother was. Adrian moved to kneel before the king. Julian looked away, flustered. He told Adrian to dispense with the formalities. Adrian noted that it was cold outside. The prince should not play for too long. He pointed out that Liam's cloak was already damp. The nanny quickly agreed. She said she would take the prince inside to change. As they left, Julian secretly glanced at Adrian. He seemed to want to look, but was afraid. Adrian asked if the king had something to ask him. Julian shook his head, then nodded. He gathered his courage. He asked if Adrian would ever harm him and Ronan. Adrian's face was unreadable. He asked if Ronan had been speaking to the king. Julian confessed Ronan's s. Ronan had said Adrian and Caleb were not truly loyal. He had told the king to stay away from Adrian. But Julian admitted he did not think Adrian seemed like a bad person. Adrian's lip curled slightly. He questioned why the king would not trust Ronan. They had been companions for many years. Julian waved his hands defensively. He insisted he did trust Ronan. He just felt Adrian would not do such a thing. Adrian cut him off. He asked if the king, a grown man, lacked his own judgment. Would he drop his guard simply because Adrian denied any ill intent? Julian's cheeks puffed out in apparent anger. He complained about Adrian's tone. Adrian told him he would be honest. He would not harm them, not before the general returned. He added that whether the king believed him was his own choice. These were things Ronan already understood. Telling Julian was of little consequence. But Ronan had clearly kept the king in the dark. The king's expression was a mixture of terror and confusion. He stammered about what would happen after Caleb's return. Adrian advised him to ask Ronan that question. He should ask what Ronan planned to do to the general. Julian was stunned. He mumbled that he would go ask him. Then he turned and ran. Julian rushed back to his residence, calling for Ronan. He asked where his advisor was. A servant informed him Ronan had left the palace. He had business at his private estate. Julian declared he would go out as well. He ordered his attendants to make preparations. Ronan's estate was a gift from the king. It was a lavish mansion, formerly owned by a princess. Inside the study, Ronan was in a secret meeting. His guest wore a hooded cloak. The visitor's speech was formal, almost unnaturally so. Ronan was wary. He asked if the man came seeking peace or death. The hooded man said he came on behalf of his commander. He was there to propose a deal. Ronan watched him closely. He questioned why they would deal with him, not the government. The man spoke with hatred. He said Caleb killed their crown prince. He was responsible for the deaths of countless Dominion heroes. His people wanted to tear Caleb apart. The Dominion commander was willing to surrender Onyx Canyon. In exchange, they wanted one thing. Caleb must not leave the North alive. Ronan's gaze was cold. He stated that Onyx Canyon was already theirs for the taking. The Dominion had no position to offer it. The man countered. If Ronan helped them, the Union would lose Caleb, and perhaps 20,000 more soldiers. But if they had to fight to the last man, the Union would lose 50,000. He asked if Caleb's life was worth 30,000 men and an intact city. Ronan was unmoved. He replied that a general like Caleb appeared once a century. He was the only one who could guarantee peace in the north. His life was worth more than a single city. The man's voice became a low whisper. He asked if Ronan truly wanted Caleb to return. He pointed out that with Caleb dead, Adrian would be vulnerable. The famed physician would lose his powerful husband. The man's tone became suggestive. He mentioned his own king's appreciation for beauty. He had heard stories of the physician. He was very curious to meet the man who had captivated Caleb. If Ronan could deliver Adrian to the Dominion capital, it could be a beautiful new alliance. Ronan's voice was sharp. He told the man not to misuse phrases he did not understand. The hooded figure simply smiled. He was confident Ronan understood his meaning. With Caleb gone, the war would end. The Dominion would guarantee peace on the frontier. The value of this trade was clear. Ronan asked what his commander wanted in return. The man smiled, knowing he had won. He dipped a finger in his drink. On the table, he wrote 2 words: supply route. After a long silence, Ronan acknowledged the terms. The man rose and gave a slight bow. He said he would await good news. Ronan instructed him to leave through a side exit. He was not to be seen. After the man left, Ronan sat in thought. He was startled by a voice outside calling for the king. Ronan's face changed. He threw open the door. He saw King Julian, pale and trembling. Ronan's estate was heavily guarded, but those guards would not stop the king. He knew Julian had heard everything. For years, they had been like two halves of a whole. Ronan knew every one of Julian's expressions. He had never seen this look before. It was a mixture of shock, disappointment, and fear. Ronan felt a sharp pain, but his voice was gentle. He called the king's name. Julian stood frozen. He looked at Ronan as if he were a monster. Ronan tried again, using his childhood name. Julian snapped out of his trance. His eyes reddened. He accused Ronan of treason. Before he could finish, Ronan interrupted him. He told Julian he misunderstood. Julian's tears fell. He cried that he had heard it all. The man wanted him to betray General Caleb, and Ronan had agreed. Ronan stepped forward, intending to comfort him as always. Julian had always been soft-hearted. He had suffered much in the palace without a mother's protection. Comforting his younger brother was Ronan's duty. But this time, Julian did not seek his embrace. He recoiled like a frightened animal. He told Ronan to stay away. Ronan stopped. He reminded Julian of his S. Adrian and Caleb would not tolerate his presence by the king's side. Once Caleb returned, Adrian would move against him. Julian sobbed that it was no excuse for treason. He was a fool, but he was still of the royal bloodline. General Caleb was fighting for their country. Ronan could not betray him now. Julian declared he would tell the Queen Mother and Adrian. Ronan's voice was sharp. He ordered Julian to stop. The king had never been spoken to so harshly. He wept, looking pitiful. Ronan explained his reasoning. The Dominion envoy had come to him. He proposed to end the war with Caleb's life. Ronan asked what he could have done. Should he have refused? Should he have killed the messenger? Either action would only make the Dominion more guarded. Julian's mind was slow, but he understood one thing. Ronan had not genuinely agreed. He asked what Ronan meant. Ronan's expression softened. He asked Julian to think. By pretending to agree, would the Dominion not relax their guard? Would they not become complacent in the battle for Onyx Canyon? Julian realized it was a trick. He was being deceived. Ronan smiled, relieved to see the old trust returning. He reminded Julian of a story he once told him. It was about a general who faked his surrender. He assured Julian he would never let him be branded a traitor. Julian was easily placated. He wiped his tears. He said Ronan should have explained earlier. Ronan took Julian's hand, using his own sleeve to dry his face. He invited him inside. He asked Julian why he had suddenly left the palace. Julian recounted his conversation with Adrian. He then asked Ronan a naive question. He wondered if they truly had to fight Adrian. He did not want to harm them. He liked things as they were. Ronan stroked Julian's head. He said they would discuss it after Caleb won his war. Julian noticed the wet writing on the table. He asked what it was. Ronan explained the situation. Caleb had been draining the Dominion's supplies for a month. That was why they wanted to know the Union's supply route. Julian asked if they planned to steal their supplies. Ronan nodded. It was likely. An idea struck Julian. He grew excited. He suggested they give the enemy a false route. Then they could set an ambush and crush them. Ronan looked surprised, then smiled. He complimented Julian on becoming smarter. Julian grinned. He said Ronan was the only one who thought so. He must have learned something from being with him. Ronan unfolded a map showing the route to Onyx Canyon. He asked Julian where the best place for an ambush would be. Julian studied it carefully. He pointed to a narrow canyon pass. It was far from the real route. Once inside, the enemy could not retreat. Ronan hesitated for a moment, then smiled. He agreed to follow Julian's plan. The king was thrilled to have contributed. He then suggested they tell the Queen Mother and Adrian. Ronan's smile vanished. He told him it was not necessary. They did not need to know. When Julian hesitated, Ronan's face became stern. He reminded Julian that Adrian wanted him gone. Giving Adrian too much information was dangerous. Any piece of knowledge could become a weapon against him. Julian was confused. Ronan always said Adrian was a threat. Yet the physician seemed so noble. He was as beautiful as a celestial being. Could he truly be so malicious? Though reconciled with Ronan, Julian was deeply shaken. Ronan, fearing the king was still anxious, arranged for a theater troupe. Julian loved plays and could watch for an entire day. The stage was set up in the palace's peony garden. This was near the Queen Mother's residence. The distant music disturbed her. She was discussing tax matters with Adrian. She asked who was enjoying theater at such a time. Adrian replied coolly. He pointed out who else it could be. The Queen Mother's brows furrowed. She commented on the king's leisurely pursuits. Adrian said it was for the best. A king like him was least harmful when doing nothing. Still, she felt it was inappropriate. With a war raging, the king should at least pretend to be concerned. She sent for Julian. He arrived almost immediately. After a mild scolding, Julian realized his thoughtlessness. He apologized profusely to his mother. He promised never to watch plays again. His sincere remorse made the Queen Mother feel both amused and exasperated. She clarified that it was about timing, not the act itself. After the war, she too would enjoy some theater. Julian nodded obediently. He promised to invite her and his brother Liam. As it was dinner time, she had Julian stay. She asked Adrian to join them as well. She noted that Liam always ate more with Adrian present. During the meal, Julian seemed to want to say something, but when asked, he denied it. After dinner, he returned to his quarters. The Queen Mother remarked that the king was not hopeless. If not for his position, he was a kind-hearted boy. Adrian simply grunted in response. The Queen thought with proper guidance, away from Ronan, he could be a decent ruler. Adrian gave a short laugh. He stated with certainty that Julian could not leave Ronan. The Queen Mother disagreed. She had seen even blood brothers turn on each other for power. The king's reliance on Ronan stemmed from a lonely childhood. Perhaps finding him a kind and intelligent queen would help. She thought this was a brilliant solution. The official mourning period for the late king was over. It was time to consider the king's marriage. She expected Adrian to agree, but he showed no reaction. When she pressed him, he answered plainly. He had no interest in using marriage to control people. The Queen Mother's expression cooled. She dropped the subject. That night, Ronan helped Julian prepare for bed. They always spoke before sleeping, a habit from childhood. When Ronan asked about the plays, Julian was dejected. He said he no longer wanted to watch them in the palace. He recounted his mother's words. He felt guilty for seeking pleasure while soldiers were fighting. Ronan was more interested in another detail. He asked if Julian had dined with the Queen and Adrian. Julian confirmed, adding Liam was there too. He started rambling about his brother. Ronan cut him off. He asked if he had mentioned the ambush plan. Julian hesitated, his eyes betraying his guilt. He had not. Ronan could read his every expression. He asked if Julian still wanted to tell them. Julian insisted he had said nothing. He pulled the covers over his head. He mumbled for Ronan to leave. Ronan's eyes narrowed. He announced his departure formally, using a servant's title. Julian knew this meant Ronan was angry. He did not know what to do. Why did Ronan and Adrian have to be enemies? They had been fine before he became king. Julian drifted into a troubled sleep. Hours later, he was woken by urgent calls. He opened his eyes to see his personal attendant, Leo. Hurried footsteps echoed outside. Julian was instantly awake. He asked what was wrong. Leo stammered that there was an assassin in the palace. Ronan was gravely wounded. Julian threw Leo aside. He asked what happened to Ronan. Leo said he was bleeding heavily in a side chamber. Julian scrambled from bed. He ran barefoot to the side chamber. Royal guards had surrounded the area. Ronan lay on a bed. A gruesome gash was visible on his side. Blood soaked through the bandages. His face was deathly pale from blood loss. But he was conscious. Julian burst into tears. He screamed for a doctor. Leo assured him one was on the way. Ronan grabbed Julian's hand. He whispered that he was fine. Julian held him on the verge of collapse. He demanded to know how an assassin could get in. Ronan gave a strange smile. He asked who else could move so freely in the palace. Julian was sobbing too hard to understand. Ronan groaned in pain. Leo spoke up. He suggested Ronan meant the Shadow Guard. Julian looked lost. He asked why. Leo reminded him that the Shadow Guard's command token was held by Adrian. Adrian? Ronan closed his eyes, his grip tightening. He asked if Julian would still trust Adrian now. Would he still want to tell him everything? Julian cried and shook his head. He swore he would say nothing. He only wanted Ronan to live. He begged him not to die. Ronan's wound was serious but not fatal. He would recover but needed time. An assassin in the king's quarters was a major incident. Captain Warren searched the palace all night. He found no trace of the intruder. When Adrian heard, he summoned Warren and the attending physician. He quickly understood the situation. He told Warren not to waste any more time. The assassin would never be found. Warren was confused. Adrian explained. An assassin skilled enough to infiltrate the palace would not fail to kill a single man. It was a crude trick. It was meant only to fool a king blinded by concern. Warren slowly understood. It was a self-inflicted wound, planned to win the king's heart. He marveled at Ronan's ruthlessness. Adrian smiled faintly. It reminded him of Caleb. Years ago, Caleb had poisoned himself. It was a desperate act to be recalled from the north. He did it just to return to Adrian's side. Caleb was also a ruthless man when he wanted something. He would fight just as hard to come home this time. Ronan recovered in Julian's own chambers. The two were inseparable. Adrian heard that the king spent all his time at Ronan's bedside. He even fed him medicine personally. After a morning council meeting, Julian rushed back to his quarters. He was going to help Ronan change his bandages. He complained to his attendant, Leo. He said his presence at the meetings made no difference. He did not understand politics anyway. With the Queen Mother and that man in charge, he was not needed. He would rather spend the time with Ronan. Leo reminded him of Ronan's words. The king's presence on the throne was symbolic. It showed everyone that the country still belonged to his family. Julian found this silly. Everyone knew that already. Leo lowered his voice. He mentioned rumors that the country was now ruled by two other families, the Queen's and Adrian's. Julian was puzzled by this. He was still thinking when his carriage stopped. He looked ahead. His face darkened. The second name could only be Adrian. Adrian was walking with the Assistant Secretary of Defense. They knelt as the king's carriage approached. Before Ronan's assassination, Julian was always polite to Adrian. He never made him perform such formal greetings. Now, the sight of Adrian brought back images of Ronan bleeding. The beautiful physician now seemed terrifying to him. He was a man who had nearly killed Ronan. He would not admire someone who would harm the person he loved most. He had to protect Ronan. Adrian and the secretary remained kneeling. They waited for the king's permission to rise. Adrian looked up at Julian. The king flinched, his eyes filled with fear. Only after Leo prompted him did Julian speak. He told them to rise. Adrian asked if the king was troubled. He noted his pale complexion. Julian tried to put on a stern face. He said his affairs were not Adrian's concern. He ordered the carriage to return to his quarters. The secretary was one of Adrian's key allies. He was worried by the king's attitude. He asked Adrian if he should not try to explain things. Having the king's favor was better than not. Adrian was dismissive. He said explanations were useless with fools. They only believe what they want to believe. Besides, Ronan had a reason for blaming the Shadow Guard. He must be confident they would not expose his lie. Adrian suspected Ronan had used the king's authority. He had likely won over many people. To some, the Queen Mother and Adrian were outsiders. They would rather follow a manipulative advisor. They did this under the banner of loyalty to the royal family. The secretary was shocked. He asked about the command token Adrian held. Adrian replied that the token meant little against the king himself. Adrian was pensive. He wondered about the timing of Ronan's scheme. The secretary suggested it was related to the northern campaign. General Caleb was on the verge of retaking Onyx Canyon. Adrian noted that Ronan's injury forced him to step back. Why would he relinquish power at such a critical moment? Perhaps he wanted them to lower their guard. The secretary's face changed. He realized Ronan might be planning something bigger. Adrian agreed that things were too quiet. He knew Ronan should not be so reckless. Not when it could give the Dominion an advantage. But Ronan was desperate. He cared little for the country's fate. Adrian suppressed a wave of dark thoughts. The priority was still the North. He asked about the supply shipment. The secretary calculated. He said it should have reached Onyx Canyon by now. Adrian stayed at his office late into the night. He had planned to stay in the palace. But he changed his mind. He took his carriage from the palace gate. He told the driver to go to his family's home first. His parents were surprised by his unannounced visit. They feared something was wrong. Adrian reassured them for now. But he said something might happen soon. He urged his father to take a leave of absence. He should take his mother and brother away from the capital. He suggested they visit their grandmother for her birthday. His mother asked what he would do. He said he had to stay. His father accepted his decision without question. He only told him to be careful. The next day, Adrian's family left the city. Life in the capital continued as normal for a few days. On the monthly day of rest, Adrian was in his laboratory. He was feeding a small, exotic insect. His house manager, Victor, entered. He said a letter had been delivered. The messenger had left immediately. Victor described him as a man in a hooded cloak. Adrian stared at the blank envelope. A sense of unease grew within him. He opened it. His expression turned to ice. Victor asked cautiously if he was all right. Adrian carefully put his specimen away. He then ordered his carriage. He was going to the palace. He told Victor to find the man who delivered the letter. Victor asked what to do when he was found. As Adrian climbed into the carriage, he gave a one-word reply. Kill him. Adrian arrived at the palace in his everyday clothes. He met the secretary leaving the king's main office. The secretary was frantic. He said he was just coming to find him. It was about the supplies sent to Onyx Canyon. Adrian's voice was frigid. He said they had been intercepted. The secretary was stunned that he already knew. He explained that the convoy commander had saved some of the supplies. But it was only enough for a few more days. Adrian told him to come inside. He said the king would explain everything. Inside, King Julian, his chief minister, and the treasury secretary were present. Ronan was also there, looking pale but composed. Adrian ignored him. He turned directly to Julian. He demanded an explanation. Julian's face went white. He stammered that he did not know what Adrian meant. Adrian said someone had told him otherwise. They said the king had made a deal with the Dominion. The tens of thousands of pounds of supplies were a gift. Julian denied it frantically. He started to explain, but Ronan cut him off. He asked Adrian who his informant was. He warned Adrian against falling for a trick. Adrian found this laughable. He said no one needed to sow discord between them. Ronan admitted he had met with a Dominion envoy. He claimed he only pretended to agree to their terms. He wanted to lure them into an ambush. He said he had letters and soldiers to prove it. Julian quickly supported him. He said he had approved the plan. It was his idea. He just did not know why the enemy had not fallen for it. After Julian's stumbling explanation, Adrian's face was dark. He asked if Julian truly believed the enemy commander was a fool. A narrow canyon pass was an obvious ambush site. Using such an obvious trap was an insult to their intelligence. This enemy had outsmarted their best generals. He had conquered half the northern territories. He was a master strategist. Adrian asked what gave Julian the confidence to play games with him. Julian was consumed by guilt. He said he was only trying to help. Adrian laughed, a cold, sharp sound. He asked how someone like Julian could possibly help. The chief minister angrily told Adrian to watch his tone. He was speaking to the king. Adrian did not even glance at him. He turned his gaze to Ronan. He asked if Ronan was also so naive. Ronan's composure did not crack. He claimed he had not anticipated the enemy's brilliance. Adrian's response was calm. He called for the guards. 2 royal guards entered the room. Adrian gave the order. Seize Ronan. Execute him by staff. A dead silence fell. Julian was the first to react. He leaped in front of Ronan. He declared that he was the king. He would not let Adrian give orders in his presence. Adrian's voice was devoid of emotion. He stated Ronan was guilty of treason and of corrupting the king. Ronan, clutching his wound, denied the charges. He insisted he had proof of his innocence. The chief minister also demanded evidence. Adrian smiled faintly. He said they misunderstood. He did not need evidence to kill Ronan. A crack finally appeared in Ronan's calm facade. Adrian looked at him with contempt. He said even if it was a genuine trick, it did not matter. He would kill him anyway. The throne room was a place for solemn state matters. Adrian stood there in simple white clothes. He was surrounded by officials in their formal robes. He looked like a scholar, not a man of power. Yet this man was defying the king. He was ordering the execution of the king's closest advisor. He repeated his command. The guards hesitated. They were loyal to Caleb and by extension to Adrian. But defying the king so openly was rebellion. Julian shouted at him, asking if he dared. Adrian replied that he did. The treasury secretary tried to mediate. He reminded Adrian that no one wanted the supply disaster. Even if the king had miscalculated, it was an honest mistake. He warned Adrian against such disrespect. Julian, emboldened, found his voice. He declared that he was the emperor. He would have Adrian punished. He ordered the guards to seize Adrian. He sentenced him to death. The final words came out as a sob. He had not wanted Adrian's life, but Adrian wanted Ronan to die. Ronan could not die, so Adrian had to. The secretary dropped to his knees. He pleaded with the king. He said Ronan was suspected of treason. Adrian was only trying to protect the throne. The chief minister sneered. He said it was not a junior physician's place to do so. Adrian stared at Julian. The last bit of pity he felt vanished. A thought struck Ronan. Adrian intended to kill Julian. Until this moment, Adrian had needed the king alive. A living puppet was more useful than a dead one. The king's death would create a succession crisis. But now Adrian was past caring. He was losing control. And that was exactly what Ronan wanted. He leaned close to Julian. He whispered, asking if his order was serious. Julian, avoiding Adrian's gaze, affirmed it. He declared Adrian guilty of treason. Ronan smiled and clapped his hands. A man in black tactical gear entered. He was the commander of the Shadow Guard, Captain Miles. He knelt before the king. Ronan asked if he had heard his orders. Miles nodded, rose, and drew his sword. The polished steel reflected the light. He advanced on Adrian. The secretary tried to block his path. He reminded Miles that Adrian held the command token. Miles was impassive. He said the Shadow Guard served only the king. Just then, a voice boomed from the doorway. It was the king's uncle, a powerful duke. Behind him were his own elite soldiers. He announced that no one would leave the room. He had come to protect the king. Another group of soldiers appeared. It was Captain Warren with the Royal Guard and the cavalry. Warren laughed. He said he was also there to protect the throne. But not the current king. He was protecting the memory of the late king. He brought forth an old servant. The man identified himself as the late king's chief attendant. He claimed the late king had written a second, secret will. It was hidden behind the throne room's main plaque. Miles used his power to dislodge it. A sealed document fell into his hands. He read it. His face grew grim. It was the late king's handwriting. The will declared the previous heir had been wrongfully disinherited. The old servant explained. The late king had been forced to change the succession. He did it under duress. The true will restored the proper line. Ronan laughed hysterically. He accused Adrian of forgery. But with the Shadow Guard commander confirming its authenticity, his allies deserted him. The Duke quickly switched sides. He denounced Julian and Ronan as usurpers. Ronan's face was a mask of defeat. Julian sobbed, asking Ronan what to do. Ronan was numb. He said they had lost. Julian ran to Adrian. He begged him not to kill Ronan. Adrian's voice was shaking with restrained fury. He asked if Julian had considered the soldiers. What would happen to them without supplies? Would the Dominion spare their lives? Julian froze. Adrian said he would not kill Ronan now. He would save him. He would execute him when the army returned victorious. He would be a sacrifice for their triumph. He leaned close to Ronan. He told him he had given him a choice. He had warned him what would happen. Ronan looked at the weeping king. He made one last request. Spare Julian's life. He said the boy knew nothing. Adrian gave a non-committal gesture. The guards led Ronan away. Julian was removed and confined to a country estate. With Julian deposed, the throne passed to his younger brother, Liam. The boy became a king in name only. After the coup, Adrian was consumed by a deep fear. He was plagued by nightmares. He dreamt he was back at his old home. He stood in a snow-covered courtyard. He saw Caleb in a wheelchair, dressed in red. He looked as if he were sleeping. Adrian walked toward him, his red cloak dragging in the snow. As he got closer, Caleb's face was peaceful. He reached out to touch him, but he could not. He woke with a start. He touched his cheek and felt tears. He asked his attendant if it was snowing. It had been all night. For 2 weeks, he had received no letters from Caleb. After the supply convoy was ambushed, Caleb concealed the news. Only he, Silas, Wyatt, and Sam knew the truth. Silas had fought his way back with the salvaged supplies. He was gravely wounded but survived. Caleb had wanted to send him to safety. Silas refused. He had promised Adrian he would protect the general. Caleb joked about his loyalty to Adrian. Silas insisted it was out of respect for Caleb himself. The lack of food quickly affected morale. Soldiers saw their rations shrink. They complained about the cold and hunger. Wyatt argued they must attack. He said waiting would destroy them from within. Sam argued against a reckless assault. The two officers argued constantly. Caleb sat by a small fire, listening. He finally spoke. He ordered the remaining supplies to be distributed. Let the men eat well for 2 days. After that, they would attack the city. Wyatt was overjoyed. Sam was hesitant. Caleb explained that waiting was no longer an option. He said he had a plan to minimize casualties. That night, Caleb reread Adrian's letters. One simply said, "I know," in response to his poetry. Another said, "I miss you very much." He had teased Adrian, asking for more detail. Adrian had replied, "I want to sleep with you. Are you satisfied?" Then he had detailed Ronan's political maneuvering. Caleb missed him terribly. He called Wyatt outside to look at the moon. He told Wyatt that if he were captured, they must rescue him. He had promised Adrian he would not die. He had written a guarantee. This plea struck Wyatt deeply. He thought of his own family. He realized Sam was right. Every life was precious. He vowed they would all survive. Later, Wyatt discovered 2 soldiers in a supply tent. They were Jack and Leo. He accused them of immoral conduct. He brought them before Caleb for punishment. The punishment was death. Jack, the larger man, took the blame. He asked to die in battle 2 days later. He was assigned to the first wave of the assault. Caleb looked at the 2 men. He told them their names were lucky. They would not die tomorrow. He dismissed them. 2 days later, the Union Army attacked Onyx Canyon. The Dominion forces fought back fiercely. The battle was a bloody stalemate. The first day, Jack did not return. Adrian saw Leo crying silently, eating a bread roll. 2 days after that, Leo was also gone. The siege dragged on. The Union Army's morale plummeted. Their food ran out. Caleb gathered his officers. He said the Dominion commander knew he could not hold the city. He was trying to inflict maximum damage. He was waiting for one thing: Caleb himself. Caleb announced his plan. He would pretend to retreat. He would lure the enemy out of the city. He would lead them into an ambush in a narrow pass. He would be the bait. Wyatt and Sam protested vehemently. It was too dangerous. Caleb insisted. His life was the only bait valuable enough. He believed Wyatt's cavalry would arrive in time to save him. Silas insisted on going with him. He had promised Adrian he would keep Caleb safe. Caleb agreed if the doctor cleared him for duty. That night, Caleb led a small force out of the camp. They rode slowly, leaving a clear trail in the snow. He ordered them to light torches. He wanted to be seen. Soon they heard the thunder of hooves. A massive Dominion force was pursuing them. They were all fanatics, ready to die. Caleb led them into the narrow pass, the gulch. As they entered, they felt the ground shake. It was not Wyatt's cavalry. It was Dominion reinforcements. They were trapped. To make matters worse, an avalanche blocked the pass. Wyatt and his men were cut off. Caleb knew they had to hold out. The fighting was brutal. It lasted from dusk until dawn. Caleb's force of 3,000 was whittled down to 30 men. He fought on foot, his horse dead. He kept telling himself Wyatt would come. Silas saw a figure moving stealthily toward Caleb. He intercepted him, but the sudden movement reopened his old wound. In that brief moment, an arrow flew from the darkness. It was aimed at Caleb. Silas shouted, "A." Caleb heard him, but he was shielding another soldier. The arrow struck him in the chest. A second and a third followed. His legendary spear fell from his hand. Stuck in the snow, holding him upright, Silas rushed to his side and caught him as he fell. Caleb's face showed fear for the first time. Not of death, but of what his death would do to Adrian. He had broken his promise. Just then, he heard faint shouts. Onyx Canyon is ours. Wyatt had finally arrived. The Dominion forces broke and fled. Silas held Caleb's hand. Caleb smiled. He whispered that it hurt. More than the other times. He asked if they had won. Silas, weeping, confirmed their victory. Caleb pleaded with him. He could not die. He had promised Adrian. He begged Silas not to let him die. He said Adrian would cry. He wanted to say more, but he coughed up blood. His body went limp. Silas held him, trying to stop the bleeding. The blood flowed endlessly into the snow. Caleb's vision blurred. He felt his body growing cold. He was dying again. He thought that if Adrian could just forget him, he might be happy. Then he heard Silas shouting his name. He was begging him not to close his eyes. He said Adrian was waiting. Caleb's eyes snapped open. He could not die. Adrian would only be happy if he lived. He fought to stay conscious. Through the haze, he saw a single beam of light. It broke through the clouds. He whispered, asking if it was morning. Silas nodded through his tears. It was dawn. Caleb stared at the light. He held on, filled with a desperate will to live. His eyes reflected the morning sun. Then, the light in them faded. But his eyes remained open. In the 3rd year of the new reign, Caleb died. He was pierced by 100 arrows outside Onyx Canyon. His final gambit had worked. The city was retaken. The Dominion was shattered. It was a great victory, won at a terrible cost. There was no celebration in the Union camp. White banners flew in the wind. Wyatt knelt before Caleb's memorial for a day and a night. He swore an oath of vengeance. Silas prepared for the long journey back to the capital. He carried the official report and the news of Caleb's death. The journey would take 2 weeks.